Good evening, this is Futures Trading Alpha. A quick 10 minutes video. It's Monday the 11th of March. It's nearly 7 p.m. GMT. And I wanted to record a quick video and I am intending to record some trading session this week when I can, but without recording a whole hour of video, as it's probably very painful to watch somebody else trading for an hour. What I would find quite interesting is if you'd have ideas on what specific subject you want me to brush on. Again, the whole idea is not to go through a too long. Is to keep things very simple and short and sweet, and the idea is to share small knowledge, small sessions, knowledge, and share what I use and how I've been training for probably nearly 10 years. The idea here is to the longer I think one trades, the more simple we tend to trade, and the idea really is to keep it super simple and try to strip out anything which is vaguely unproductive, and also to, as I said in the first long video, those who haven't watched it, that I try to question everything and not necessarily take anything that is being said for granted, and I think everyone should take control and ownership of what they want to look at and use what makes sense to them and not what is supposedly something that needs to be done. Generally speaking, there's no indicator here, no smoke and mirror, no holy grail, no green or red arrow, no signals, no technical as far as I'm concerned. It's purely looking at the order flow and all the tools that simply allow to look at the order flow and really try to identify what day type we're in and who's in control, and if it's a symmetrical day, a balanced day, or unbalanced day, or P-shaped day, or a D-shaped day, and if we're also what's happening, where's the value, where's the supply and demand, and how is it moving, how is it evolving, are we in a responsive phase, or is it more initiative, order flow phase? I mean, all of this is the sort of questions that I tend to ask myself. Some of the elements will help to confirm and position oneself. So having references, points and confluence areas and zones and levels which have been left by previous sessions is always a good idea. And here really I'm trying to build two different scenarios every day. In fact, three. The first one is I do nothing scenario. The second one would be the bullish one and the bearish one. And then if it's the bullish one, this is where are we likely to go to, and what would be my target. If it's a bearish one, likewise, what would be my target, where we'll be going to, and then what's the most likely, what's the least likely, and from there just observing the order flow, or observing the order book, observing the market orders, so looking at a delta, more precisely looking at the cumulative delta and the evolution of delta throughout the day, looking at the volume, and again the evolution of volume and the size of the volume, and the volume as well, the speed, and probably daily market profile, volume profile, the same on a weekly basis and monthly basis, which are going to give reference points. and then trying to have it's almost a process you don't even think of. Once you do it every day, it just comes very naturally, I would say, without thinking too much about it. And then also look at comparing, trying to see if there are some divergence in terms of the data and the price action. Is there any absorption or more, or are we so are we looking at delta divergence? And that's the sort of thing that you know, I tend to look at and more understand where value is, and likely to go to more than being a pure sort of scalper or order book trader. And again, I'm not saying this is what should be or should not be done. This is what I do. It's completely different. Obviously, some people do trade only mainly the order book, and we look at the gaming on the order book, and are really good at it. So that's great. It's not so much that I think is overly difficult, but it's probably more a case of something that feels digestible for me, something that I just very simply feel like doing, feel like observing, analyzing. It's not me. So I think everybody has to find their own track and path, and how to what makes sense to them, as opposed to specifically choose some technique which should be applied and is a universal truth or not. The only truth that there is the whether or not you feel comfortable, you not taking too much risk, and you are successful. That's the only truth. The rest is just so. In that specific example of today, and again, just more not so much to get back on a day with insight, but just look at the fact my chart won't expand. There we go. Look at the fact that I managed to get in late around 6ish, which is probably even more here. To the end of the Asian session, got in long 5 contracts. The goal, as soon as we got above Friday's high, which is a regional sort of target, was Thursday's first, as in the one we see here, single print, which was expecting to be a target and at the same time reject it, which happened, and we had this sort of setting tail here. The low volume node that you can see here, and there are many on that day, by the way, is this massive one here, one here, one here, one here. Likewise here and here, and a poor high. So that's fairly. That was a bit of a day that Thursday in terms of the range, in terms of shape, in terms of the distribution. Obviously left the same sort of big low volume node on a weekly profile, last week's weekly profile, and most of the Thursday was Friday profile resulted in was highly impacted by Thursday. Profile, sorry. Now, so yes, got a bit of this move, was hoping to build more volume up here. As you can see, that hasn't happened so far. On this low volume node here, and then we had a bit of a small sort of, small sell-off. Was expecting it to go all the way down to previous low value area, which didn't really happen, and we reverted, and now we're sort of going back to this original, effectively what's an area of accumulation, where we spent quite a long last chunk of the day with effectively not that much happening. So that was the plan, and the plan was sort of you have this sort of scenario one as I got in here, high of the day, single print that has panned out. I guess the other scenario from here would have been probably we've got there's no real buying tail here. We've got quite a bit of a low volume node here, which was not at all worked on here nor here, so it would have been probably aiming certainly definitely in that sort of area here, so maybe all the way down to the low of Friday, not to say Thursday. But that didn't happen. That scenario one was the one which was to some degree pound that. And then adding to that, obviously, weekly, monthly profile. What's happening on the actual footprint, so versus market orders versus limit orders, and then looking at various engulfing bars we had, and obviously we know that they tend to precede some moves, so they're always a good idea when you see an engulfing bar to observe what's going to happen afterwards. Not that much volume. We picked up a little bit from the beginning of the London session, but not a crazy day in terms of volume. And you can see that from here, for sort of just before fixing, we were price and delta were working together, and then it started to diverge. You can see that from this point in time. We've got a delta which keeps going down, at least the sort of trend is down. Sorry, the words are quite hard this time of the day after being training all day. And then we've got a clear divergence with pricing, and we're clearly going up from here. So we are suddenly absorbing this negative delta, suddenly observing these market orders selling in quite a good way, in the sense that it's also as well, so not only is it absorbing, but it's just not moving, it's actually trending up versus this delta going down. So clear divergence here, which happens a lot on the 60 euro dollar futures. And sometimes when there are big moves, you can see, I can't remember when was the last example, but it's very, very, very frequent that the big moves show a real absorption of this, a real divergence of delta. My guess is that it could be different reasons. Here's clearly some aggressive sellers being absorbed, but some days you can see it's when you look at a sort of size as well, these orders, they tend to be quite large, and it is clear that if you want to, it might be quite controversial here, but if you want to get out of a position or get in a position, so get out of a long and therefore initiate some short trades, or getting out of a long, and i.e. being a short market trade, or initiating a short. And if you have some size to some degree to execute, it's probably better to do it when there is liquidity available. So liquidity will happen when there is momentum. When nothing happens, there's no liquidity. There's nothing. When there's a big move, we've got some liquidity, some limit orders here. It's never easier actually to. It's very, very sensible to sell size in a bull market, in a bull movement, as opposed to the other way round. Certainly if you have size. I know it's quite paradoxical, but again, that's the sort of thing that when you think about it, well, yeah, I'm selling, or I'm getting out of a long, doesn't matter, but effectively I'm selling. And who am I going to sell to? I'm going to sell to buyers. So if there's no buyers, I can't really sell to anyone. especially if I want to sell size. So if I want to sell size, I need to wait until we've got a buyers taking control. And once they're taking control, obviously there will be buyers. I'm a seller. I will find my match. So, having said all that, I was reached the 15 minutes of my video. Don't want to make it too long, but it's just the general things to look at. As you can see, nothing is very complicated. It's all very simple. It's just a story unfolding every day. It might be different. Obviously, you still want to keep watch of the news and economic announcement and various things like that. But it's nothing, no holy grail, nothing magic about it. It's actually fairly reasonably simple. So not too bad of a day, a $2,000 day, nothing crazy, but given that sort of day, it's quite it's good enough. I shall stop here. I will try to record more training session and more have this sort of thought process being involved. It's always interesting to have the analysis at the beginning of the day and then maybe pause it so it doesn't last for hours, and then see how it pans out and evolves, and then stop it once a bit later on, so you have a different phase of the day, and I feel it's quite interesting to watch without having something that lasts too long. But obviously sometimes nothing happens when it looks promising originally in the day, and nothing happens, and you realise that, well, I'm not going to post something where nothing happens. So I'll try to do some of that later on this week. I wish you a good evening for those of whom it is the evening. Please feel free to, if you've got any questions or anything you want me to focus on, don't hesitate. And happy trading.